So the conditions are that price has to be moving away from the PP line to trigger a signal. So let's see, for example, here would be an example. So we have the stochastics crossing below the 50 line, right? And it also looks like, maybe not. Let's see, no, sorry, those did not line up. So let's see if I can find another example there. No, that didn't line up either. There we go. All right, so we got stochastics crossing the 50, and we also have down bars here, right? So we have some down bars as the stochastics is crossing below the 50 line, and right, price is below the pivot line there, so therefore, right, price is moving down, so it's moving away from the PP line, and so that's, basically that's the signal trigger. And then one of the filters is we don't want any signals when price is, within some range of a pivot line. So let's see, I'm on a 20 range bar, so I don't know, let's triple that. So let's say 60 ticks, right? So let's just say price has to be at least kind of 60 ticks, which I think is probably approximately something like that. So price has to be 60 ticks away from any pivot line for a signal to be generated. So quite possibly that bar right there, it's kind of hard to see. Yeah, so it looks like we have the stochastics crossing the 50 on a down bar, so that potentially could generate a signal, right? But it's too close to the pivot line there, so we're going to exclude that. All right, it looks like we have another example here. Yeah, I think that's another example right there. Yeah, so that looks like that's more than 60 ticks away. So, all right, so there's our question there. So let's pull up BloodHound and start working. Let's see, we'll focus on this bar right here, since this makes a pretty good example. All right, so there's some kind of a shorthand version of the name, right? So really, this is all triggered by the stochastics crossing the 50 line. So, but it also needs to be, price needs to be, moving away from the PP line, and then also price needs to be 60 ticks away from any pivot line as well. So there's the shorthand version. All right. So let's always start with the easy parts first. And so the stochastics crossing the pivot line, that's definitely I think the easiest element or the easiest condition here of this system. So let's grab a crossover solver, connect it in there, and let's give this a name. All right, and let's see. So input A is going to be the stochastics. Let's see, there's our stochastics, and of course I'm just using default settings here, and we'll use the %D plot there. All right, input B, that's going to be our 50 value, right, or the 50 threshold level. So the type is going to be changed to fixed value, and then we can put in 50 as our fixed value, and there we have it, right? Pretty straightforward. Crossover, crossover, right? Pretty simple. Okay, so that's the easy part. number one. So let's see. Easy part number two is the signals, have to be away from the PP line, right? So in other words, let's stretch our chart, right? So, if price is below the PP line, then you're only going to get shorts, right? Because price is moving away from the PP line. When it's below it, that's shorts only. So we can do that easily as well. And that would be a comparison solver. Yeah. So when price is above the PP line, then you're only looking for long signals as price is moving upward and away from the PP line. So all right, so we're comparing the close of the bar to the pivot PP line there. All right, so input A, we'll set that to price. There he goes, and we'll just use the close of the bar. And let's see here, input B, that will be our pivot PP line there. So let's open up input B. All right, there's our pivots indicator. And I haven't mentioned this in a while, but let's see. Well, actually, I don't think this is true anymore for NinjaTrader 8, but with NinjaTrader 7, the only way to get the pivot line to calculate correctly is when you calculate it from intrabar data. So they have defaulted it to intrabar data, and I would recommend keeping it there. So I think though with NinjaTrader 8 they fixed that problem that Ninja 7 used to have, so you should be able to build it using daily bars, but I don't remember testing that. I may have tested that a long time ago when NT8 first came out, but just be aware, that if you put your indicator on, use daily bars and it's not working, well, then that just means Ninja 8 still has this problem with the pivots indicator. Anyways, just that little tidbit of old information. Let's see here. All right. So we have the pivots indicator loaded, and we want to compare against the PP line, which is already selected for us. So we're good there. All right. And the outputs are already, the default settings are already correct, what we want here, right? So when the close of the bar is above the pivot's PP line, then we want A. When A is greater than B, we want a long output. And so if A is less than B, in other words, if the close is below the pivot line, the PP line, then we want a short output, right? So this is our direction filter. Oh, there we go. I already have, now this shrunk up so we can see price is currently below the PP line. And we're getting a short output. And I doubt price ever goes above the pivot line. Oh, there we go. There we go. Let's see if we can find that crossover point. Oh, look at that. So we're actually getting we're seeing some differences between the indicator. Let's see, calculate from intrabar data. Trade range type daily. So, yeah, so the pivots indicator running inside a BloodHound is giving us a different calculation than what we're seeing on the chart. So I'm just trying to figure out why that might be. Yeah, I'm not sure. Let's see. Let's try and reload the chart. And maybe that'll fix things. There we go. Okay. There we go. So a chart reload fixed the discrepancies there. So there we go. Simple enough, right? Price goes above the PP line. We get a long output. So obviously that would be price moving, away from the pivot line. And so we'd be looking for longs only. And if price is below it, then when price is moving away below the pivot line, we'd be looking for shorts only. All right, so there's two our conditional filters. And let's see here. There we go. Stretch my chart out a little bit. That way I can see my logic template. Okay. All right, so let's put these two things together. So let's grab an AND node. All right, so now we have some signals here. And what we need to clean out are, right, when there's an up bar. Right, so up bar is obviously moving, for a short, and up bar, is moving towards the PP line. So the bar direction, needs to match the signal direction. So let's include a bar direction. And there we go. That signal is now gone. Right, that's a down bar. There we go. And let's see. Yeah, there we go. We had a signal on this up bar here. So there we go. That's gone. Right. So now, if you wanted to allow maybe one extra bar, for price to reverse direction, we could do that pretty easily there, right? So we can see we got a bunch of down bars and then an up bar, and then then a down bar right afterwards, right? So if you want to create an allowance there, in case the crossover bar is in the wrong direction, and maybe the next bar will reverse into the correct direction of the crossover, then what we can do is take our crossover solver, right? So here's our crossover solver signals, and we can increase the look back period, to 2, right? And so you can see our crossover signals now extend out to 2 bars, right? So we have this 2 bar allowance now from the crossover signal. So if we take a look at this, right? So now where this signal was gone because the crossover, let's see. Yeah, the crossover is actually on that bar, but then we get a 1 bar, right? So there's a little tip right there, and it probably, no, that one was okay. Let's see, what do we got back here? Yeah, so here, now of course, you might get 2 down bars in a row, and so you might get 2 signals in a row, right? But that's probably going to be okay there. So, and oh yeah, so here's something that can happen. So so the crossover actually happened on this bar. Let's see. And then, but of course, this close is above the PP line. So we got the signal afterwards. Although, you know what, we can just ignore this because price is too close to a pivot line anyways, and we haven't added that filter. Yeah, so let's not even consider that. Yeah, let's not worry about that at all. Yeah, and again, this long signal might get filtered out because price might be too close to a pivot line. But, you know, we can see that that's an up bar. The stochastic crossed above the 50 line. And there we go. Oh yeah, here we go. Here's a good example. So it looks like, yeah, this is the crossover bar for the stochastics crossed over on this bar, but it was a down bar. So giving it that one extra bar allowance, you know, did allow a signal to get through, you know, when this up bar appeared. So there. All right. So far so good. We just have one more additional requirement or condition to include. And where's a good example? Here we go. So here's a great example. So, right, these signals are basically like almost right on the PP line there, right? So we want to eliminate all these signals when they're within 60 ticks of the pivot line there. So that will be a job for the support resistance solver there. All right, so let's connect that up there. So let's see, what are we looking for? So we are looking for headwind mode. And we'll come back to this, what is headwind mode in just a moment here. I'll give a quick explanation. And we want to use an indicator for the support resistance lines. So we're going to set use indicator to true. And you can see, right, that the property grid here expands here. So when we set use indicator to true, we can see the select indicator section opens up for us. And then we can select an indicator. So let's go in and select that pivots indicator. There we go. And this time, we're going to use this special option that only the support resistance solver has, which is select all. Right? So we're going to select all of the pivot lines. So that's one thing that, you know, that's unique when you're evaluating, you know, support resistance lines, is quite often there's a lot of support resistance lines. So there we go. So we've selected, you know, all the pivot lines here, and we're just using the default settings again. So let's click OK. And now, next thing is what price, you know, what price needs to be, you know, that 60 ticks away from each pivot line. You know, that's going to be the closing price. So that's already set for us, you know, but, you know, in some situations, you may want to compare other prices of the bar to a pivot line. So, right, now we get down to the distances. So let's expand all these distances. And instead of using an ATR, right, since I'm on a range chart, ATR doesn't make much sense. So let's change this to ticks. Change the ATR down here to ticks. And then what do we want? We want 60 ticks. There. All right, there we go. So our distances are set to 60 ticks. And let's see here. So the default output settings, are correct for this situation. The standard default outputs are basically, as far as support resistance evaluation goes, you'll probably almost never need to change the outputs. The default works for 98% of all cases there. So we'll leave those alone. And let's take a look at the chart here. Right? So the way the support resistance solver is working is if you're below your support resistance line, right? So if you're below your line, then when price gets within 60 ticks below, let's move this down here. Let's see, where is 60 ticks? Yeah, somewhere around there. So when price, so over here, price is, oh, wrong one. So over here, the closing price is more than 60 ticks away. And we can tell that because we have a long output. Right? So the close is 60 ticks away from the PP line. So having a long output tells you that you're far enough away from the PP line that you can take a long trade, right? It's safe to take a long trade because you're more than 60 ticks away. But then where the square is, where the rectangle is, right? Now the closing price is less than 60 ticks from the PP line. And so there is no long output, right? So in other words, it's blocking a long signal. So no long output means long signals would get blocked, right? So that's how you read this, is the support resistance solver is telling you when it's safe to take a long trade, when it is not safe to take a long trade, when it's safe to take a short trade, and when it is not safe to take a short trade, right? So that's how you read the output, right? But, our conditions are a little different, where if price is within, 60 ticks above or below, it doesn't matter, then no trade. So what we need is both a long and a short together, right? Long and a short together. So the way we can do that is use a long short modifier, like that in there. And let's see, the mode, let's use product. Yeah, there we go. Product works. So that's what we're looking for, is these areas, right, where price is let's see here, there we go. Right, so we're looking for these areas where price is 60 ticks away from the pivot line, and so even if yeah, here we go. So even if price is above the pivot line, still no signals because it's within 60, not even a long signal because it's within that 60 tick range of a pivot line. So no signals at all. And then once price gets 60 ticks or more away from a pivot line, then it's safe to take a trade. So, all right. So let's see here. Let me get back to the long short modifier, and I always like to name it for the mode that it's doing. There we go. So it's doing a product. which is multiplication. All right, so let's take a look at what we have so far. Let's see, where was that? There we go. Okay, so here's the area, where the signal is really kind of close to the pivot line. So now that once we connect our support resistance filter in there we go. They almost all disappear except for one. And all right. Well, I don't see any follow-up questions on this. Yeah, I mean, this was pretty straightforward. Not that complicated. The only part here that really gets complicated is using the support resistance solver. Definitely people don't really think of support and resistance in a technical system building fashion. So, wrapping your head around what's tailwind mode and headwind mode, people are not used to this terminology. There really is no common terminology used for support resistance for what the solver's doing. So we kind of had to make up our own word here, terminology, headwind mode and tailwind mode. And once you understand what they're doing, then headwind mode and versus tailwind makes total sense. But you do kind of have to dive in to the definition of what the two modes are figuring out for you, right? Or what are these two modes telling you, in the solver's output. And once you wrap your head around that, it makes sense. The best way to do that is to watch the training video on the support resistance solver, right? So, and I have a feeling that once you do wrap your head around the support resistance solver, you'll probably find it useful in your system. Not for just evaluating a pivots indicator, but you can also use support resistance for moving averages, or other just single line indicators, right? So, so if you want to watch the training video on the pivots indicator, so that way you can get a good understanding of what is tailwind mode versus headwind mode doing, then we'll go up to help and pull up the documentation. And so on the BloodHound side menu here, scroll down. And so under the solvers, there we go, support and resistance. There you go. Keep scrolling down. I mean, there is a written definition of what's going on here. Right, so under options and then hit mode, so there's a written description, but obviously if you go to the video at the bottom there you go. So, and yeah, that's right, this actually has a few examples as well. All right, so there you go, support resistance solver training video there.